All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today's session here at Virtual GALA 2022. My name is Edith Winnemecker, and in my day job, I am the head of globalization at NADA. But today, I will be your MC for this session. Today's topic is important and crucial to anyone working in localization. Code and content are created and live in hundreds, if not thousands, of repositories and business systems. Each has its own format, structures, and access methods. This diversity poses a huge challenge even to any company operating globally, as there are many steps that need to be followed. In this session, Don, Allison, Rickard, and Wayne will discuss best practices and how and when organizations can solve this challenge. Let me introduce the moderator and our panelists. The moderator of the session is Dr. Donald A. DePalma. Don is the founder and chief strategist of the market research firm CSA Research. He's involved in shaping the strategies of many of the world's largest technology firms and the industry's most influential language service providers. Alison Furch is GALA's executive director. She leads operations at GALA and is responsible for the growth of the association, its financial stability, and for the expansion and delivery of member value. Bob Willens is CEO of XTM International, which he co-founded in 2002. XTM International develops and sells XTM Cloud, a web-based CAD tool and TMS. Rickard Engels founded Zilio in 2004. Zilio is a global provider of content migration and integration software for digital transformation. And last but not least, Wayne Borland is responsible for translation of Dell.com, support content, learning and development, and marketing collateral for more than 80 organizations across Dell. Okay, so let's get started. Don, please take it away.
Thank you, Edith. Let me grab a file here. Okay. Excuse me. Welcome, everybody. The genesis of this panel was the ongoing question of standards, which have become increasingly important as organizations around the world have undertaken their digital transformation strategies. So it's connectivity, not obviously between paper and the rest of the world. That's being eliminated by digital transformation, but connectivity among and between the systems that run the corporations, the governments, the businesses, the non-governmental organizations that we all deal with, some of us deal with. The idea is to store their content in a variety of repositories, and it crosses the range, everything from content management systems, document management systems, website systems as well. But it's now moved into other areas over the last 5 years as organizations have moved into increasing the number of systems that tie into their systems of record of corporate and social engagement. That brings into the connectivity discussion things like marketing automation, product information systems, and code and version control systems. It's an awful lot of moving pieces. So in short, what a global organization or one dealing with domestic multilingual audiences has to do is manage all of this content in the source form and then in the applications to deliver it to individuals in the various languages in all the target locales. Has to transfer this information from one language to another. It has to happen expeditiously with a reasonable level of fidelity to the original, efficiency of operation, and automation of all the business critical systems and procedures. So what we're going to be talking about today is the reality of content, global content management for a lot of organizations. It's the software equivalent of this hot mess that we typically see in server rooms. And you can see here this integration pattern that's at a fairly high level, which hides a tremendous amount of connectivity issues, coding, waste, and a variety of other corporate issues that cost money, time, and energy. So the challenge is to make this much more efficient. And the idea that's been driving some of the operational work around connectivity has been moving from what we see on the left of this slide a traditional 19th century kind of dock with individual barrels, let's call them segments, being loaded onto ships versus something that we see here on the right, which has changed for both the better and over the course of the last couple of years for the worse. Shipment around the world of items, all of a like type with similar attributes, moved in large chunks by efficient transport vessels. So that's the idea that companies have, the model that they're moving towards. Now, what we're doing here is looking at this from the perspective of several different groups. Wayne is looking at it from is considering it, working these issues from an enterprise business perspective. We've got a couple of companies doing language technology represented in Bob and Rickard. And Allison represents a very large contingent of language service providers. So we'll get their perspectives on the model. So to start out, Wayne, I'd like to turn to you. Dell's a big organization. It gets bigger nearly every time we look, both from acquisition and organic growth. So it's become progressively larger over the last 20 years. And that obviously means you're bringing in a tremendous amount of technology, of people, of content from the organizations you're buying. What's this meant for Dell's localization team?
Sure. So, well, we got a little bit smaller recently with the spinoff of VMware, but that didn't necessarily reduce our complexity. So, to echo a lot of what you already said, Don, we have CMSs, we have DAMs, we have SharePoints, we have oddball applications, we have homegrown systems, we've got decade-old systems, and we need to get content in and out of all of them. And today we build specific APIs, connectors into a specific endpoint solution. Typically that's in the cloud, but just think about a TMS. But that means, if we want to change that endpoint solution, we oftentimes have to redo all of those connections, right? So if we want to follow the industry innovation, or we can't follow the industry innovation because it's too much work to reconnect all those systems. But that's really just, the tip of the iceberg, because, the problem goes beyond just how do we connect the repository to the TMS and send, the core content that needs to be translated. The bigger issue is the portability of the metadata. We lose a lot of fidelity, in the transactions today, but data is key. Data is what will fuel the AI-driven solutions in the future. So, and I don't mean TMs or term lists. Those are important data, but rather the key metadata like edit distance and source analytics and linguistic aspects of the source and risk assessment and quality estimation, target quality analysis, et cetera, right? We don't just need to move containers of data around. We need that metadata to follow the content. And that's an area I don't think we as an industry have really spent enough time talking about.
Okay. So that we can get the perspective or understand the requirements and perspectives of the people listening in, I'd like to bring up the first question in our poll, which is basically, who are you? That'll help us tailor some of these discussion points as we move through the hour. Wayne, on the question of metadata, that's a critical issue. You said the industry hasn't dealt with it, but I'd say that's not for want of trying. There's been efforts over the last several years, for sure, with the FP7 project that came out of the European Union with automated content enrichment or enhancement. There's been a number of issues around terminology and other bits of let's say, content assets that should be shared. And of course, all of the things that you said is what are the operational numbers associated with each of the things, such as content, edit distance, and the like. You said that the industry isn't doing anything about this. Is there any organization that you've seen that's working towards this end and doing anything actively towards it?
Well, I wouldn't say we're not doing anything. I would say we probably haven't done enough, or maybe we haven't made enough progress. I think there's certainly lots of organizations. GALA is one of them with previous efforts. I think there's a lot of folks a lot of really smart people that are working on this. I think the challenge is how do you get all of those systems to work together and be able to move data back and forth seamlessly on the same type of a standard, for lack of a better term.
This gets into something we're going to talk about later in the session here, but it's a good opportunity to bring in the two technology companies here. Bob, how aware or how active is XTM at this point in dealing with these kinds of, let's say, essential metadata issues?
Yeah, so for us, connectors generally are a really major part of our development strategy. It's super important that we can connect XTM into a wide variety of different CMSs, and we provide a full level of functionality. So within XTM, we use XML throughout, and metadata can be saved as within an XML file. So we are able to save that data, and obviously if the CMS can take it back, then we can send it back. And also if you want to then go and do a some kind of report or have some kind of evaluation of how you've been performing, all that data is stored in XTM and is available to be reported on.
Rickard, I know that you've been doing a lot of work outside the localization area with content management systems integration, importantly migration. We're looking at this from a localization perspective. Is the industry overall on the content management, the document management side, any further advanced than say the translation management sector is at this point?
Yeah, that is a difference of light and day, I would almost say. The industry that revolves around content management systems is all about headless. It's all about interoperability. It's all about exchange of information. It's about the enrichment of the metadata. While quite cynical, the localization industry is all about vendor lock-in and making sure that no other partner or no other vendor talks to your client. And so the unfortunate truth is that it's really the opposite. So as a result, it's not advanced at all, in my humble opinion.
Allison, from the association perspective, and especially from the standards point of view, is there any activity that's going on across organizations, across this divide of source and target locales that you can share with us what's going on? I can mention Tepic as a starting point.
Yeah, Tepic unfortunately has taken a long hiatus for two main reasons. Number one, our key volunteer moved on, and number two, the pandemic really slowed things down. But one of the things that they were working on in the first phase of Tepic development was this so-called metadata wrapper that Wayne was talking about, so that I think it's important that there is some consensus about which metadata is most important when you're passing these files back and forth. That was one of the things that they were working on. We're sort of in wait and see mode. GALA is when it comes to this, which we'll get to in a little while. Rickard's going to talk about some of the things that are happening in the commercial space, I'm sure. But from our standpoint, it's still very important to discuss a standardized approach to this. And hopefully we're going to, I won't say resurrect, but revisit some of the topics that Tepic was addressing.
Yeah. This question of metadata is something that I keep coming back to, and recently was listening to a NASA broadcast. I'm in Florida now, so there's a lot of, about 20 miles from Cape Canaveral. And there's a lot of news about what's going on there. And an interesting bit was there's something like 240 kilos, I think, of moon rock that were brought back from the various missions to the moon. And what they've done is sequestered a large chunk of that moon rock for future analysis by future technology. And the idea being that if the material hasn't been tested before, there are secrets yet to be found. And this is, I think, a good analogy for what we're talking about here. There's a lot of metadata that could be collected but we don't necessarily know that it's of value yet. So is there any value in just collecting anything and everything and then hoping the future technology will be able to do something with this, let's say, wealth of potential information? Wayne, you're from a company that I think would benefit greatly from companies storing absolutely every bit that they ever collect. So why don't you start with this? Any thoughts on that subject?
Sure, and just kind of going back to the previous conversation, in the case of XTM, but it's not just XTM, it's any TMS. There is a lot of metadata available, but the question is that metadata going to follow if you move to a different TMS? And answer is probably not. But to your question specifically, Don, give you a good example. We were collecting edit distance data for a number of years before we really started using it, and we started using it now in a lot of the work that we're doing on our training engines, or looking at the quality of the engines and what we're getting from a post edit improvement standpoint. So I would agree. I think collect all the data, because you don't know how you may use it in the future. And as we move into, as I said earlier, this AI driven world, there may be needs for data that we don't even understand today, that things that may not seem important to us today that may be critical for an AI system to make decisions.
Okay. So Bob, I'd like to turn to you here. Move on to this slide here. There's a few approaches to connectivity. This slide here shows just a couple of them. Rickert mentioned a headless connector as one of the things in the CMS world. The world in general here, I think we talk a lot about connecting to APIs. There's a lot of talk of connectors per se, and hubs, and specialty software development kits. Can you tell us a little something more specific about the middleware that you're developing for your solution in order to talk to the rest of the world?
Sure. So we have a range of different solutions that allow different levels of connectivity, and they start off with a simple watched folder that will basically send content through to XTM for localization and send it back to a different watch folder, and where it can be picked up and published. That's all very well. It's very simple, but the problem is that users invariably want greater functionality from within the repository, from within the content management system. The kind of things that they need to be able to do is they need to be able to determine when content is sent for localization, whether it's in small chunks or in large batches. They need to be able to determine what workflow or what kind of project settings they need to use, such as what MT solution to use, or how many people, whether it's just an MT translation, or it's going to have post editing or in-country review. All these different stages need to be determined. Then, having done that and set the project running, for example, you may want to know what the cost of that localization is before you actually approve it. And then you need to be able to monitor the progress of that of that translation through the system from within your content management system. This is all controlled from within the content management system. And finally, you need to be able to review the translation in context, and you need to then be able to send it back for when it's finally approved for publication. So a lot of functionality needs to happen within the content management system. And for those reasons, that's why we have continued to develop our own connectors, because we can then leverage the maximum functionality from within XTM.
Okay. I'd like to, before we go on to hear on another approach, the one from Zilio, I'd like to bring up the second polling question, which is, how many different systems do you integrate with your TMS? As we saw from the polling question that just went up earlier, we see that we have a mix of enterprises, LSPs, and some others. This is interesting in terms of understanding the scale, the scope of what you're trying to accomplish. If it's one-to-one, it's pretty easy, I'd say. But as you add complexity, that's when it starts to, you add complexity with each system that you add. Rand, can I have the screen back here? I think people, let's head back a slide or two here. In terms of, there we go. Here we're looking at a somewhat different but similar approach to what Bob was just talking about. And Rickard, if you could say what you're doing here.
Yeah, so basically, there are two ways to connect to a content management system. You can pull the content out of a content management system. We use a standardized middleware solution for that, and then you have to set the automation rules within the middleware. And then then basically it's your quality of the connector that determines the quality of the use case. So there the story is absolutely correct. Then there are connectors that need to be developed within the content management system itself, because the content management system itself does not provide the APIs to pull the content out of the content management system. And the systems where it's needed for that are Adobe, Sitecore, Drupal, and there could be a few more, but I know 100% certain that it's Adobe, Sitecore, and Drupal, where you're very limited in your possibilities to pull the content out of it. So you need to build a plugin within the CMS. For Sitecore, you need to build a plugin within the CMS. You have no other option, because Sitecore has not developed a standardized solution. So the quality argument is an argument, because everybody has to kind of solve their use case. But for Drupal and AEM, that is just absolutely not true. AEM has developed a plugin that can be downloaded from AEM, can be downloaded from the Adobe App Store, and nobody other than AEM has access to the source code. So the quality that is available to us is determined by Adobe. And all we can do is build an API into that plugin within the content management system. And there are 91 LSPs that are TMSs that have built an individual connector to Adobe with all the same functionality, because there's only one. And they all say that it is unique quality, unique features. It is complete and utter nonsense, because each client downloads the plugin from the Adobe Marketplace. It's deployed within the Adobe tenant, and then you simply select the receiver of the content. There is zero flexibility in what you can do. So why do people develop their own connectors? It is just because they want to control the round trip as much as possible. There are literally 91 LSPs and TMSs that develop the same connector. While there are middleware providers in the market that you can simply hook up and you get it automatically.
Right.
And
so much like
the same counts for Drupal. There is only one way in Drupal, or there might be two ways in Drupal, but it's the same principle. Yeah? There is a feature set that is developed by the owner, but Drupal has no owner, but it is developed by the content management system, and technology that wants to get that content just hooks into that feature, but you do not control the feature. So it is like you have zero control. It's like you want to change how Microsoft SharePoint, how Word works. We don't have access to Word. Word is developed in Seattle. You can only import a Word file, and you can only work with the features provided by Word.
Yeah, so I think we all have some ideas on how we would improve Word, but you just hit a few interesting issues here, Rickard, that I think are actually pretty interesting in this space, and I've been following standards for like 30 years in various industries. So the first here is the fact that there's 91 companies building the same thing. Is this speaks to the Full Employment Act for programmers. So I think it's something that's necessary to keep people working and off the welfare rolls. But seriously, two other things you mentioned. One is the lock-in by the source side company. You're locked into using their approach, which means that they have some interest in ensuring that things are done exactly according to their specifications. Now, you would know better than I think most of us on this panel, because of your work with content management integrations and migrations, that these things might have some reason for doing that. But is there any reason for that level of control as you're taking something from presumably one language in a quality form to another language at the equal level of quality?
I don't want to sound too cynical, and I also want to present a solution at the end of the panel. But I have been providing connectors for the localization industry for the last 4 years, and I have had multiple shootouts where my connectors are presented by top 10 LSPs, by all providers in the shootout. So there were 2 or 3 vendors in the shootout, and I was involved 2 or 3 times at the same client. And so I knew who won and I knew who lost, and I never got a call from the winner. So I was just simply used. So the harsh reality is that in my experience of providing connectors for the localization industry, that a LSP or a TMS simply does not build connectors and outsources them to us. But if they have a few and they so-called partner, then you're basically used for demo purposes, but they never have the intention to actually buy. A top 3 LSP literally told to me, Rickert, this was the board member, Rickert, when you talk to my client, you're my competitor. And I can't say it's simpler than that. I had another big TMS that wanted the Drupal connector, and then they wanted a quote and all these kind of things. And then after 2 weeks, they said, like, we actually don't need a Drupal connector anymore. I said, why not? We have 3 clients. I said, okay, so why do you want a connector partnership? I mean, if you have 2-3 clients, then you have a business case, so you're going to do it yourself. So there is no desire amongst the top players to actually adopt a standard and to actually no, I have to say it differently, to adopt another party as part of their workflow. And the reason why Tepic as a result has suffered is that with Tepic we have tried to convince the larger parties to actually adopt the standard, but the larger parties kind of adopt it in their words. And there are many larger parties that have all official partnerships with Exilio. I can guarantee you, no. We have a couple of larger partnerships. They use us for everything. If they have their own connectors and they say they have a partnership with us, no, I'm their free pre-sales.
Okay. Let's understood. There's certainly lock in and lock out. Let's look at the third thing that in your discussion there, which was quality, which was a term you used a few times, and I think has been, from my touches in this conference, a major theme going across the board. Just what is quality? And it tends to be one of the things that everybody sells. Our quality is higher than somebody else's if you're an LSP, or the quality of our code is better than somebody else's. I guess this goes to Wayne in terms of the levels of quality obviously depend on the use case as things go through your system. But what's the quality management that you use in terms of this migration from, let's say, English source to whatever other language you're going into? What does Dell do?
We use DQF as a basis. We look at the different, what is the intent of the content, or what is the user need. So if it's a product document or a KB article, then they really just need to be able to go from step 1 to step 2. doesn't need to be pretty. It doesn't need to have the right tone or those type of things. And and then moving up towards our marketing content, our content on our websites, up to say our advertisements or things that we put on other websites, or kind of key slogan type of things. Those, so they have different audiences and different purposes. So we look at those differently based on what those end goals are. And we're now adding to that risk assessment, and looking at even really now our big, to be honest with you, our big focus is turning away from measuring the end quality of the translations, while still important, but we're really turning towards looking at and trying to measure the quality of the source content, because if we can control the quality of source content, or we can understand the issues within the source content, that allows us to be much smarter about what pathway we put that content down in the first place to get the best outcome. So we're really starting to focus more on the quality of the source.
Okay. Going to you, Bob. XTM is certainly one of the players in the space in terms of major TMS provider. Are these elements of quality, of integration, as you've already talked about, are they things you're building into the system from day one, or are they add-ons at this point?
So the quality is something that we have DQF integration, which is user customizable depending on the different profiles that you're looking for. So that's something that we can monitor on a regular basis, and then we can store that against the specific vendor who's doing the translation. And you can monitor the trends over time. Actually, the integrations, by their very nature, the integrations tend to be, as Ricard was saying, they tend to be fairly complex bits of software. The CMS or the repository changes on a fairly frequent basis, and so we have to often modify our code in order to take account of how the CMS is working. So it's not something we can just write once and then it's all ready to go for forever. We have to keep maintaining that software. And the end result of this is that unfortunately connectors are quite an expensive part of the overall system, but the benefits they bring are enormous in terms of automation, speed of delivery, reduced, the fact if you have a connector, then you're going to be eliminating human errors. So that in terms of quality, that's an immediate advantage. And, I have not seen middleware that will give the full range of functionality that we can create with a dedicated connector for a CMS. So in that respect, I differ from Ricard. I think there is a definite future for dedicated connectors.
Just jumping in here real quick, Don. Something that Bob said. The cost of the connectors, and I'd never really thought about it before, and did some quick mental math. We probably pay as much, if you kind of combine all the connectors we probably pay as much for connectors as we do for the overall TMS solution. And I'd never actually even thought about that before.
So when you look at the numbers that just came up on the poll a minute or so ago, a lot of about 40% of the audience is using 5 or more connectors, or rather connecting to 5 or more systems with their solutions. So that does get to be expensive over time. This is a question for the technology builders here. The question of cost was one I was about to bring up here. What we have here is a number of systems, of assets, of resources that are tied to the various content management and market automation systems and other things that you're building in. These systems in turn are supporting corporate initiatives, things like customer experience or employee experience, some transactional systems in the case of solutions like ERP, manufacturing ones as well. So you've got here is these translation has become over the last decade or so a significant part of the enterprise offerings for companies, but they really tend to be kind of the I've often characterized it as the flea trying to hold on to the tail of the dog rushing by. It's just not funded, or it's not as much investment as necessary. So the technology solutions here are providing an essential business critical enterprise level link between the source systems and how those source systems are instantiated in each of the markets where that content shows up. So this now means there's an enterprise stack requirement, that you have the connectivity and availability requirement, that it's always there. You have we've talked about quality as an issue, that it has to represent the brand. So there's a data integrity kind of issue as well. There's issues around scalability. Is this thing going to melt down when you put through 50 projects or not? So you can just go through all of those corporate kinds of iddies. And then you say, what does this cost, let's say XTM, or cost Zilio, or cost any of the other providers of connectors to make these things? So what goes into building this? I'll go to you, Rickard. How many people are working day in, day out on, say, the Adobe connector or Sitecore?
I mean, as a rough estimate, the building cost of a connector are 100 to 150,000 euro, and the cheapest that could be possible is around 60 to 80,000 euro, and it can't really be that much cheaper.
And Bob, what kind of skill set goes into building these kinds of solutions?
Yeah, so that's the problem. If you're looking at something like a AEM, then these are really highly skilled. These are the top developers that we have in XTM. Because they can go out in the market and they can earn top salaries. The thing to bear in mind is that if you look at it from an enterprise point of view, an implementation of a major enterprise CMS can run into several £100,000 or dollars, or in excess of $1 million, which kind of puts it into perspective that a TMS and the connector is relatively a small part of the overall pie. The cost of a CMS is enormous. Obviously, the benefits are huge, but the TMS and the connector part is relatively small.
Okay. So this raises the question here of, given these costs, and this isn't a one-time cost, right? It's episodic every time there's a release of whatever the source system is. So you can't just fire and forget. You have to keep somebody looking at this thing, knowing with each release of AEM 27.1.4-3 that there may be some impact on what it is you're actually building. So the question here is, why do people build these things themselves? We've run into any number of companies that decided, I'm going to build this. And it's a question for anyone on the panel here, anyone who's gone off and built their own connectors. I'll throw it first at Wayne, whose company probably has the kinds of resources that Bob was just talking about, who could build these.
Yeah, so we do, although we're not, a software development company at our core, and somewhat challenging for us as the translation organization to really tap into those resources, and expensive, as Bob said, to go procure those ourselves. We don't, we have folks that help connect the APIs today, but we don't have, and what we haven't done to date is build a sort of internal hub or connector hub, we're talking about it. We're considering it. Should we go build our own middleware? It gives us more control over not just the data that we can extract from it, but also gives us potentially a little bit more flexibility if we want to make a move on the TMS side. Then all we have to do, if we have this great hub where everything is integrated into, then we just have to change that one endpoint API. So it's something we're certainly considering. But also to Bob's point, Rickard's point, that's going to take us time, and we're going to have to devote a significant amount of resources, and those resources cost money to go and build that. So we're still kicking it around.
I mean, I have the middleware available for you, Wayne.
I know.
and we are so the interesting element here is that the adoption of the middleware seems to be a very difficult thing, while the adoption of the middleware from the other side of the business is like a piece of cake. So our middleware is used at Moody's, at Financial Conduct Authority, at Calix, at the ECB. It's all secure. It's all part of the infrastructure of the client, and for some reason within the translation industry, it is like, no, let's get it from a TMS. So it kind of is mind-boggling to me how that is even possible. I mean, so we were talking about numbers. For the price of a connector when they are sold is roughly about 20,000 euro per year. That's what every TMS charges for it. Now, and sometimes when I talk to a big client and I say our connector is 20,000 euro per year, for instance, now we have changed our pricing model. I will say that in a second. But if we say that our connector is 20,000 euro per year, they say that's expensive. But to the same client, if they ask me how much is a migration, I tell them for 50,000 euro, I make you a plan. So for 50,000 euro, a company like Dell would get a plan how to migrate Dell.com to a new platform. And then you only get a plan, and then for another 80 to 100,000 euro, I execute the actual migration as well. And that is no problem. And we are charging that at small companies, not only at Dell's, but also at local governments, etc. So it is like the price perception seems to be completely off. And that is just, to me, that is kind of a mind-boggling thing.
Yeah, and I think, and we haven't really talked about this, but I think why you see that as a challenge, or one potential reason why you see that challenge is, in a lot of companies, translation is still seen as a cost, right? It's not seen as scale. It's not seen as this is how we drive our customer journey outside of the US, right? So while it can be easier for us to go pay for a $15,000 connector because we're going to charge that back to the business, it's or they're going to pay for it. It's a much different discussion to try to kind of bring all these different internal stakeholders together and get them to agree to funding something much larger, right? So I think that's the key is we have a challenge in our space and in many of the companies that we work in, and kind of demonstrating that value and being able to get the support for making those larger investments.
Yeah, I think that there you hit the nail on the head. That's my conclusion. Kind of is like there is hardly any business enablement within the translation workflow, and it's almost by default, because one of the things that we haven't touched upon yet is that because I'm from the digital agency world, so I know the AEM developers, the Sitecore developers, I know the marketing managers, because those are our clients for the typical migration deals. And but digital agents or the digital developers at the client spend more time sending the content, preparing the content for translation, which is then picked up by the localization engineer at the client, that the localization engineer puts it then into a TMS. But everybody talks about the time of the localization engineer. But how about the time already spent by the digital developer preparing the content and just making sure it's kind of like included in the correct way? So there is kind of it's almost by default a supportive activity. As a result, the business benefits are kind of not really visible. It's a ongoing discussion, and I know that many people support this argument and try to break it, but I almost think that it's very difficult to break it.
But you know, one of the things I think is that you inevitably you compare the cost of a connector to the TMS that you're using, and the problem is that a TMS, in our point of view, we're selling it to a wide group of clients. Therefore, the cost of development is spread across all the clients. Whereas a connector, even on a widely used connector like AEM, there's still only a relatively small number of our clients who have AEM. So therefore, you have to spread that cost over a fewer clients, and therefore, inevitably, it's more expensive.
Yeah, correct.
Or sell XTM to more AEM customers. So,
and Don, I just want to say one thing from the perspective of small companies, because 69% of GALA members are 5 million and under in revenues. These conversations aren't even accessible to the vast majority. So yes, there's more than one way to skin a cat, and you guys are talking about two very expensive ways to do it. And one of the reasons we were so interested in this sort of open source and standard approach is for the accessibility. It's so beyond the reach for so many smaller agencies, smaller companies, that there has to be another answer, at least in our perspective.
If I may break in, Alison, it was not accessible. It was not accessible. But I have, of course, analyzed the failure of Tepic and why it has not been adopted. So most of the industry doesn't know, but there has been a very successful, and the reason why Tepic is not adopted is, of course, because of vendor lock-in. We can talk about quality, whatever we want. It's only vendor lock-in. They fight standards. You see it in every industry. The big ones fight the standard, and But there is one successful example within the industry about a successful standard, which is COTI. And COTI is a standard in Germany for technical writers, and everybody joined. The TMSs in Germany, the LSPs in Germany, the clients in Germany. It was very successful. So what is the main success criteria for a successful standard? Commercial alignment. Yeah? Not wishy-washy wishful thinking, but commercial alignment. So I took that as a starting point. I changed the pricing model of our connectors, and I reached out to not the top 10 LSPs and not the biggest TMSs, but let's say not the top 5, but the others. And I got 12 localization providers committed, integrating into our platform. We launched it as Hello Translate. It's still available as lockup as well, but we launched a new brand, Hello Translate. I got MemoQ committed. I got FlowFit committed. I got Crowdin committed. I got Intento committed. I got CustomMT committed. I got Local committed. I got Crossline committed. So there are, and there are a few more. I got E2F committed. So there are lots of localization technology providers that said, okay, we want to use your connectors. We want to make it available for everybody. And we will integrate using Tepic. Because I told them the only way you can integrate with me is with Tepic. Because if we're going to do it with the watch folder, which is the reason why there is no quality, because there might be APIs and TMSs, but in localization workflow, somewhere is the watch folder where all the metadata is lost. That's the reason why there's no quality. And so I told them, we integrate with you as part of the ecosystem. We change the pricing model, but you must build a Tepic client because otherwise we can never provide interoperability. The commercial reason behind it from our side is like, okay, I just want to provide a localization workflow possibility for the end client so they can componentize the features that they want without vendor lock-in, all based on the Tepic standard. And with 12 vendors, respectable vendors in the industry, committed already, and there were Translate 5, there was Kaleidoscope, and so that is, then you have, I think we get critical mass, and the commercial interests are also aligned. Because the other thing I did, there are two more, I don't want to steal too much time, but there are two more big announcements. We changed the pricing model. We made it free for end clients. So the middleware, the connectors, everything is free.
Rickard, we're running out of time here. So After this session, anyone who has any questions for about the things that Rickard just mentioned as new products can talk about those. We're at the point where we're about to go to Q&A. So what I'd like to do is just have before each of us, before we go to Q&A, there was one thing I wanted to talk about in terms of one issue that Rickard just raised, which is why Tepic hasn't taken off. And I think something like this I've seen standards committee meetings over the years that I've been involved in technology turn into things that either look like the Jerry Springer show or Jeremy Kyle in the UK. People aren't necessarily throwing chairs, but there is that kind of what's going on here that has stood in the way of standards in the localization sector for as long as I've been involved in it for the last 25 years. So I think there's some things that we have to consider here. Standards organizations in general have a tough time. Ones that have commercial buy-in, commercial alignment, for sure, those are the ones that work best. You look at very large organizations, COTI is the example that Rickard used, but we've seen things like ODBC, Open Database Connectivity, in other industries that starts with a low price point and moves up through a low price point in terms of development requirements, but then moves up to full-on kinds of integrations such as Bob talked about. So there's a lot that remains to be done in this area. And the unfortunate thing is it's going to take a lot longer because there's let's say, infinitely increasing number of solutions that are coming on in the content management on the source content side. So instead of leaving on a note here of, it's dire, we can't go anywhere, there's lock-in, I wanted to end on a note of what we think can be done and give everybody here about a minute. Start with Bob. What do you think can be done here to improve the connectivity situation moving forward? Bob, you're on mute.
Apologies. So XTM International as a company, we are firm believers in standards, and we've implemented many standards right from the get-go. And I think the whole standards issue has to be, as Rickard said, it has to be commercially driven. There has to be some kind of reason why you're going to be implementing them. The demands on as a technology provider are huge in terms of what should we be including in our roadmap and what shouldn't. And you end up, unless you have a commercial reason to do something, you probably won't do it. So if there can be, if it can be commercially driven and it can be related, because it's not only from the TMS and the localization point of view, it has to be in conjunction with the repositories and content management systems as well.
So it has to be driven by enterprise business requirements, which means there's all the IDIs that I mentioned, functionality, reliability, security, but there's also the other thing with what piles of money are associated with doing this, or what kind of customer satisfaction can I provide if I do this? So both sides of business. Okay, Allison, now we'll go to the association perspective.
The association perspective is I suppose more like the shared resource perspective. I was going to say socialist, but I don't think that's fair to say. From our perspective, we want to see competition, fair and open competition. David Phillip, our key volunteer, used to always say, these companies ought to be competing on the special sauce, not the can. And so we want to see smaller companies able to compete, and currently it's out of scope for them. So we want to see some sort of solution that smaller companies can use and access that allows them to, for example, prioritize their consulting services, or their amazing customer service, or their excellent project management, or their creativity and really high quality. So really compete for customers without well, without having to be one of the big guys and to like, Rickert was saying about lock-in, well, we were all talking about lock-in. So it's really this argument about accessibility. So we want to see connectivity accessible to the smaller players in the market and not just in the realm of the big guys.
Yeah, don't rule out the small shops that want to deal only with a particular vertical or sub-segment of a vertical. Those people are locked out as well by not being able to get in. Rickard, on to you.
Yeah. So this is what Alison wants. Is exactly what we try to do. So we try to build an ecosystem. We base it on Tepic. We force all the technology players to integrate with Tepic. We changed our pricing model, so all our connectors and middleware are free for end clients, and we charge 1 cent to the LSP. So if they translate 1,000 words from Adobe, we charge them €10. If they translate 100,000 words from Sitecore, we charge them €1,000. If they translate 1 million words from Contentful, we charge them €10,000. And so that makes it very accessible because it makes it all kind of free, and they pay as they go. And so that is what we try to do. The second thing what we try to do, because we have so much technology integrated, is that we have issued a TDK where we try to solve the big problem of connectivity. The big problem of connectivity is either you know the CMS or you know the TMS, but no developer knows the CMS and the TMS. But we have middleware, so we created a simple API to integrate with and included boilerplate code so that a developer at the enterprise doesn't need to understand the API specifics of the TMS. They can just copy paste the code from the CMS into the boilerplate code. And because we have 93 LSPs on the marketplace and 12 technology players, we hope to convince digital agents and CMSs to build an integration into us using this TDK.
Okay, great.
So that's how we try to solve the interoperability once and for all.
And let's move on to Wayne to finish off the session.
Yeah, I don't think I have an easy answer, but I think, one, I'd love to live in the world that Alison described, where we're looking at suppliers only based on their secret sauce. And in my mind, that secret sauce is really the quality of the interaction we have between their PM teams and my PM teams, because that's where the rubber really meets the road. But I think, kind of going back to something we were talking about a little bit earlier, is that there's this huge hurdle that we have to overcome within the client space, within our own companies, of elevating the value of what we do, the scalability that we provide to the company, and to be able to even kind of have the conversations about the investments that we need to make to bring in these sort of unifying technologies. So I think that's one area that has to continue to be worked on. And I think we have to continue to have these conversations and continue to look at maybe how we can implement some type of a standard that will allow us, as I said at the very beginning, to really follow the innovation instead of being locked into a particular endpoint solution.
Okay, so we're ending with some real requirements for the associations to get together on with I'd say the business side of the organizations they're dealing with to make Tepic something real, to have it support the requirements. I think what Wayne just laid out is pretty much what everybody's been looking for. You don't want to go in and have to choose something just on the basis of because it works with your Tesla, or it works with some other object that you have. So, and as somebody who's been following standards for a long time, I know that this is an uphill battle, requires the investment of all constituencies that are on this call. So I encourage everybody to take a look at Tepic, take a look at some of the other standards that are there, and let's say, buy local. So I think we're just about close enough to the end that I'd like to thank everyone for sharing their views. I'd like to thank everyone who attended, and look forward to doing this the next time on a long couch a la late night TV style. Edith? Okay, then I think we're done here. We'll see you next time, wherever it happens to be.
Well, actually, Don, you just queued that up really nicely for me, because those of you in the online audience today may not have heard, but where it will be is Dublin, Ireland next year, March 12th through the 15th. And I think we should revisit this conversation there and see what 1 year of progress has got us.
I'm all for Dublin. So.
Alrighty. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks to the great moderator and the panelists. And yeah, we look forward to see the progress within a year. And then everybody else, please enjoy the rest of GALA. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.